Well, hello and welcome to another installment of A Doctor in Wonderland, The Adventures of a Clinical Psychologist in the Family Courts. In this particular segment, I'm going to be discussing my entry into the family courts. So, previously, I've talked about my initial contact, getting the client, tumbling down the rabbit hole, and winding up looking at all the various options here and orienting to where I had landed. Well, today we're going to be going through the door and into the wonderland of the family courts, and I'll be discussing the first encounter, my first meeting with the hookah smoking caterpillars of the PAS experts. So, where I was about 2010, 2012, I'd done a needs analysis and figured out what was going on in the family courts. The forensic psychologist did this experiment, became quasi-judicial role for doctors, and developed a whole new assessment approach for their whole new experimental uh, uh, service delivery approach, this new role for doctors. And it completely failed. It was awful. The forensic custody evaluations are awful from the beginning to the end. They're awful. The whole idea, the concept of a quasi-judicial role is awful. It's wrong, as is PAS, so even parental alienation, all those symptoms of PAS are awful, awful. And so I'm just encountered with two groups of psychologists or mental health people, the forensic people who are awful, and the PAS people who are awful. And all the clinical psychologists have abandoned because it's too dangerous to work in the family courts, partly because the forensic psychologists will retaliate if they come over here. So they cleanse the system of all the clinical people and they say, we own you. And we're only going to give parents this one choice of our forensic custody evaluation. We're not going to give them a clinical diagnostic assessment because everybody would have taken that one. And it requires knowledge, and with this, they can just make up whatever they want. And it's just an opinion about what custody should be. And so it's just bad. So as I enter in 2010 to 2012, um, I wanted to bolster up a little bit more of my personality background. So I was reading Kernberg and various personality people to connect all the attachment to the personality to the family systems, delusional thought disorders, and make everything all tight. Because here's the treatment plan. Okay, is we need to get back on to established knowledge. That's the problem. We don't have competence. So the violation of 2.01, boundaries of competence, 2.04, the bases of applied knowledge. The forensic psychologists are in violation of both of those. And so we need to get back to basic competence, duty to protect obligations based on that. And so diagnosis and treatment. So we need to get back to clinical psychology, diagnosis and treatment, duty to protect, and the application of knowledge. So to do that, one of the problem was Gardner left the field of established healthcare when he gave himself permission to make up new stuff. And no, you don't do that. And the reason you don't do that was because of what happened. You can see we were 40 years, we got locked up in arguing about this made up pathology rather than applying the DSM-5 to diagnose what it actually is. So that's why you don't do that, Richard Gardner, because you are preventing people from getting a real diagnosis and you get everybody locked up in whether or not there's this new pathology. No, there's not. Anything that shows up in the family courts exists everywhere. It's just popping up in the family courts. So there's not some unique pathology in the family courts that we need a new label for, a new diagnosis. You just need to apply the knowledge to get there. And in the DSM-4, it was in the DSM-4, shared psychotic disorder, shared delusional disorder, and factitious disorder imposed on another. You had it in the DSM-4 if you applied it. But the Gardner people didn't apply it. Well, then where are my other psychologists, though? The Gardner people are like a psychiatrists and, attorneys and social workers and master's level. They're just a hodgepodge of people. Where are the psychologists? Oh, they're the forensic psychologists. and they're not diagnosing pathology either. So they bash the PAS people saying it's not in the DSM-5. Well, then you apply the DSM-5, psychologists. What is it in the DSM? No, we don't diagnose pathology. We do something different. We're in a quasi-judicial role. We don't like to pathologize people. It's like talking to Tweedledum and Tweedledee. When we get over to that, oh my God, the forensic Tweedledum and Tweedledee of the forensic psychologist. But we're going to get there. Okay. But now as I'm coming in, I just entered the Wonderland here. I look to what seem to be your allies. Okay, so they say they're your allies. We support you, and it's parental alienation, and we need to. So they're acknowledging that there's a pathology here, even though they're ignorant about what it is, don't understand it. At least they're acknowledging something's here. The other psychology people, the forensic, they don't even acknowledge there's anything here. They're arguing whether it's PAS and yes and no, and so at least your PAS people are presenting as your allies. So I need to do that. I react as if they are your allies. Now, I know they're not, because they abandoned you for 40 years. They did not apply the established knowledge, which means they're just lazy and they're ignorant. And I'm seeing things of grandiosity. They think they can just allowed to make things up. They're entitled, and that they have this special knowledge, that they're discovering a new form of pathology. And so I'm worried. And when we apply the DSM-5, we won't need parental alienation syndrome. We won't need that construct. It's a factitious disorder. It's a delusional thought disorder. It's child abuse. It's spousal abuse. We don't need the construct of parental alienation. In fact, it gets in the way. It keeps everybody locked up and fighting. So the moment we get rid of it, we can get a solution. But they don't want to get rid of it, right? Because the moment we get rid of parental alienation, PAS, they cease to be experts in anything. Because they're not experts in attachment. They're not experts in personality disorder. They're not experts in family. They're not experts in anything except something they can just simply make up and say, we're discovering a new pathology, and we happen to be experts in this new pathology. And then they convince the parents to promote their new pathology to proposal to the courts and everybody else that they're an expert. It's exploitation of these parents. You're not solving their problem by being a professional and applying the DSM and the diagnosis and treatment plans. You're using them to become an expert. Oh, geez, Louise. And here's the thing. I look over at the PAS people. Gardner's dead. And who's leading? It's Bill Burnett. Okay, he's a psychiatrist, MD training. So, okay, he doesn't have any background in attachment, and he doesn't know family systems. And so he's an MD doctor. He's not a psychologist. So but as a psychiatrist, he should know delusional thought disorders. He should know factitious. Those are psychiatry disorders. The American Psychiatric Association, DSM-5. As a medical psychiatrist, he should be applying the DSM-5, and he's not. And he's misdiagnosing, as a result, the shared psychotic disorder, shared delusional disorder. It's in the DSM-4 this entire time he's been out there, and he just whiffed on a delusional thought disorder. So he's dealing with these families coming in, and he does not recognize a persecutory delusion. For a psychiatrist, that's bad. And when a psychologist comes in and makes the diagnosis of a delusional thought disorder, and he's misdiagnosed it this entire time, that's a narcissistic injury. That's exposing his incompetence. He missed the diagnosis. He's not going to be a happy camper. Okay. And there's a lot of turf stuff in psychology and psychiatrists and psychologists and on a treatment team. I've worked treatment teams. I worked at Children's Hospital. In that case, the medical doctor is head of the treatment team, and I'm an adjunct to that. I've also worked treatment teams out in my clinic and foster care working with CPS. Now, in that case, the psychologist is in head of the treatment team because we're dealing with attachment pathology and child abuse. And the social workers and the psychiatrist would be medication support on that team. And so it depends on your pathology. But I've worked treatment teams. And for this family court pathology, it's an attachment pathology. And so that's in family systems pathology. So there's psychologists. So your psychologist should be heading the treatment team. And the psychiatrist is there for diagnosis of delusional thought disorders, basically. You bring them in for their expertise on that. Now, if they don't have expertise on that, then you get the diagnosis out of the attachment people, factitious disorder and persecutory delusion. So the psychologist can make that diagnosis as well. But, we just need to know how to do it. I was trained, 12 years at UCLA on how to diagnose delusional thought disorders. And yeah, psychologists can do that. So I'm a psychologist, early childhood background, 0 to 5, attachment, out of foster care, complex trauma, and child abuse, with 12 years of training in the diagnostic assessment of delusional thought disorders. Okay, so I should be leading the treatment team of professionals on this. I know that. But the Gardner PAS people don't want that because I'll get rid of their PAS. Just like when I get to the forensic psychologists, I'm going to get rid of their custody evaluations. They're not going to like, neither one of them are going to like me. Okay, and so both of them are actively disabling the mental health system response. We need a diagnosis and treatment plan based on actual knowledge, and they're stopping that from occurring intentionally for their own gain. They're both doing that. And I know this in 2012. But now if I come out and make that allegation, I'm new in the field. They're a long time, and they're got the parents all locked up. It's parental alienation. And so I can't challenge them on that. I'm new. And the forensic people, they control the licensing boards, and they got board certified forensic psychologists, and they've been doing this for 40 years and stuff. So I can't challenge them on their custody evaluations and stuff. And so I'm early in the process. So what I'm going to have to do is get greater credibility, get into the family courts, and just change it. Okay, just hold the mental health people accountable, my forensic people. So I started out to expose that which is hidden. Over the course of time, I realize it's going to take time. What I'm going to do, though, is this is a systemic failure. It's a failure within professional psychology, the APA. They allowed people to do this experiment. It was just really bad, and the experiment they didn't tell people his experimental approach. They didn't offer them an alternative. They should have never allowed a quasi-judicial role for doctors. No. That was a bad experiment to do. And so really bad things happen. So there needs, as professional psychology, the APA, comes to grips, and the licensing boards come to grips with what happened and the destruction in the family courts for 40 years caused by the forensic psychology experiment. When they come to grips with that, they're going to have to seriously take a look at how they wound up here, how they injured this number of parents and children, and what are they going to do about it? What sort of remediation steps is the APA going to take for the traumatized children and traumatized parents out of the family courts who were abandoned by the forensic psychologist and participated in the child abuse and spousal abuse by the forensic psychologist because of the lack of oversight from the APA and the stuff. So they're going to have to take a look at that going forward. So my goal in this, I'm going to operate on 1.04 and 1.05. We got a violation of 2.01, boundaries of competence 2.04, 9.01, 3.04, and principle D, justice. So we got a principle and 4 ethical violations, as well as a failure in duty to protect. I've got mandatory for obligations under 1.04 and 1.05 when there's an ethical violation by another psychologist. So I'm just going to land on those, and those are going to be my guiding motivation all the way through. Okay, 1.04 and 1.05. And to activate the established knowledge and competence, I need to define it within established knowledge, which is foundations. Okay, so the moment I wrote foundations, okay, this is the original cover too. I had to change the cover for a reason I really didn't care. Okay, long story, but I had to change the cover, and I said, whatever. But this is the original cover of Foundations. If you have the book, okay, I'll do a second edition on that. That's what I'm planning to do. This is a tool, okay, and what I wrote Foundations for is a diagnostic treatise. It's to, once I do this, I have now defined the pathology entirely within family systems, personality disorder, the attachment system, and the DSM-5, or 2015, yeah, DSM-5. So this is a diagnostic treatment. The moment I do this, this activates standard 2.01 boundaries of competence and 2.04 bases for scientific and professional knowledge. Not to Dr. Childress, to Bowlby, Mnuchin, Beck, the DSM-5, to actual knowledge. This is a conduit to activate the ethical standards. So this is a tool up to this point. And it allows me to just say, read my book. What are you proposing? Well, read my book. Here's a description of the pathology. The other thing it does, I like this, is the pathology can't think. Okay, it's a stupid pathogen. And the reason is unresolved trauma in the brain is anxious. Okay, that's unresolved anxiety. And anxiety shuts down the frontal lobe executive function systems for linear logical reasoning, foresight and planning ahead, and self-reflective insight. Because if there's a tiger in the room, if there's an actual scary thing, then I don't need to logically figure out what to do. I need to act and do something now. So it goes to emotional and thinking. If there's a tiger in the room, I don't need to plan what I'm going to do in 5 minutes. I need to act now. So that system gets shut down. And if there's a tiger in the room, I don't need to figure out why there's a tiger and what's the impact on my life of having tigers in my life. I need to do something now. So that system gets shut down. So all of the frontal lobe executive function systems get in the way of responding to a tiger. That's the trauma. Okay, so anxiety or fear will shut down those systems. And unresolved trauma in the brain is anxiety. And so it shuts down and the thinking becomes what's called associational, and it's associating on emotions. So associational, emotional. And so on a mental status exam, that's exactly what you're looking for in a thought disorder. Linear logical reasoning or associational reasoning. Okay, so one's linear logical and one goes kind of soft. And you do a mental status exam to find out what their thinking process is like, step by step. And so knowing that the pathology, I call it stupid pathogen, just to point out that feature of the symptom feature. And so anybody, all the allies in forensic psychology and in the PAS experts, anybody, GILs, anybody who has the unresolved trauma, who has the pathogen in their brain, that unresolved trauma is going to deactivate their frontal lobe. So you will not get linear logical reasoning, foresight or planning ahead, and self-reflective insight. Want an example? The forensic psychologists. They lack linear logical reasoning. They're about to find out that the violation of ethical standards and diagnosis guides treatment, they're going to find out, I'm kind of thought disordered. I wasn't thinking very clearly on my custody evaluation stuff. Because it doesn't exist. Lack of foresight and planning ahead. I've been here for 10 years. I've been telling everybody what the pathology is, and they haven't moved a bit. They don't see where things are headed. They're just going on doing their custody evaluations, going off a cliff, and they can't see the cliff that's coming. No foresight, planning ahead. No self-reflective insight. They're just like, whew. They don't look at themselves or do any sort of self-critique that maybe what we're doing is wrong, and maybe we should shift our fundamental approach. They just keep doing the same thing, even though it doesn't work, and then no frontal lobe. So when I write foundations, big old book, 300-page book, they're too lazy to read it. And they can't, their frontal lobe thinking can't understand it. It's too complex. Oh my God, it's family systems and it's personality disorders and it's attachment. It makes my brain hurt. Okay, so that's what it was. It's like a pathogen repellent. So that cracks me up that they can't get through this. So that's one thing. It's a barrier to them. And anybody who doesn't have the pathogen, though, anybody who's authentically trying to understand the pathology, they can get through this and it'll make sense to them. So this is like my little screening device for pathogen in the mental health field. Because that's the other features coming into this is the mental health people. Where is the APA? Where's the licensing boards? Nowhere to be seen. Why? Oh, the forensic psychologist, the pathogen has infiltrated our systems. The APA, they're in the APA. People with names in the APA, these forensic psychologists, and they're disabling the APA. They're disabling the licensing boards. So we got to cleanse the mental health system of the unresolved trauma in the psychologists, the forensic psychologists. And so I'll get to that when I get to that. Oh, they're an interesting group. But so I'm coming out and define it here. But back here, this was 2015 when I wrote this. 2010, 2012, I'm headed this way, doing some research. But I'm getting my feet under me, meeting your local inhabitants. And so I start with Bill Burnett and the PA aspects, because he's like the big guy leading that charge. 2012, it was pre-DSM-5, so the DSM-5 is considering things, and he's got this parental alienation study group that he started up. I joined it, and I was participating a little bit in there to meet everybody and say, hey, this is a different pathology. We can define it. And so I was, because they're saying you're their allies. And so I am going to sort of over the course of time document what's everything it's here. So I'm going to document, because the PAS experts are a symptom feature of the pathology. They were created by the pathology, by the pathogen, created a group of people. The people are a symptom. It captured them on their narcissism and their lazy and their sense of entitlement, in grandiosity, and you're developing a new thing, and that they're too lazy to actually learn knowledge, so it captured them, and that's what it looks for. The pathology has, very interesting pathology, it has 3 defenses. It hides extraordinarily well. It seeks allies to help it hide and to enact it, and it attacks viciously. Anything that threatens to expose it, it attacks. And the purpose of the attack is simply to get you on the defensive. Okay, because it just wants, because the moment the focus is on you and you're defending, it's not on the pathology. So it's a defensive response. It's defend by attack. And so it doesn't matter what the attack is, whether it's true or false. In fact, the more inflammatory the attack will force the person to respond to it, to say, no, I'm not a pedophile child abuser. And then everybody says, why is he defending and saying he's not a pedophile child abuser? So it's attack to put the target on the defensive. Very manipulative, clever than pathology. Now, Wonderland, holy cow, I encounter this. A pathology has motivation and defenses. Well, that's interesting. ADHD doesn't have defenses trying to defend people from treating ADHD. And no, autism doesn't have, ADHD doesn't want to be ADHD. This pathology, transgenerational trauma, and the delusional thought disorder and narcissistic borderline, wants the pathology. It wants the symptoms because it's using that trauma reenactment narrative as part of its processing, as part of its own regulatory stuff. So it produces a false pathology, and it needs the false pathology. So if you try to take the pathology away, it's going to resist you. It's going to fight you. It's going to attack you. And it's going to try to hide the pathology away from treatment. Autism doesn't try to hide. Autism doesn't attack you. ADHD, nothing attack. No pathology wants to be there. This one does. And the reason it does, I say, where does a pathology get motivation? Because it's an attachment pathology. It's in our motivational networks. So you get this damaged motivational networks, and they have motivational consequences. This pathology is motivated to create itself. Such an interesting pathology. And it's motivated, it has defenses, it has seek allies. So it got its allies in forensic psychology. It created the forensic psychologists, and it created the PAS people. Okay. Interestingly, both arose about the 1980s. And so the forensic psychologists were designed to isolate the group, and the PAS people were designed to keep it forever in conflict. So there's no identification. And this one says, we don't diagnose pathology. We don't diagnose pathology either. We have a new pathology. Well, it's not a... Jeez Louise. The pathology has created both of these groups, and they don't know it. And so they're in what's called staff splitting around borderline, where everybody begins to argue about the patient, the treatment, the staff splitting. And they don't even see that. They don't know, because they don't know they're dealing with personality disorder pathology. Really? You don't know you're dealing with narcissistic borderline personality pathology? So you're going to go staff splitting? Oh, they're so stupid. They're so stupid. And so they're part of the symptom features. Oh, my goodness. So going forward, this is such an interesting pathology that is in transgenerational trauma and narcissistic borderline dark, and you're going to be unpacking this for 50, 100 years after I leave. Okay, look at me, old guy. I'm out of here quick. You're going to be getting wonderful information from this pathology, transgenerational transmission of trauma in our attachment networks that we don't see, causing delusional thought disorders, persecutory delusions, and look in our social surround. It's kind of topical right now, persecutory delusions and collapse of narcissistic dark personalities and stuff. And so in the family courts, we have it like in distilled form, that it exists everywhere else out here. But boy, we got it. Just such wonderful place for research study on this pathology, narcissistic borderline dark personality, collapse and delusional thought disorders, factitious attachment pathology, transgenerational transmission of attachment. Wonderful location for research. I was in research. I was 12 years at Keith Nectarline at UCLA, major NIMH research project. I worked with Jim Swanson, major NIMH researcher on ADHD. I know research. Oh my goodness, this is such a fertile field for research. Get some research grants into the family courts. Department of Justice, get some research grants into the family courts. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, get some money in for research into the family courts. It won't take much. Give your top 2 universities in a state, give them a research grant to come up with a diagnostic assessment protocol. I can do it, but give them to do that. Start collecting data out of that's why the diagnostic assessment of pathogenic parenting, the checklist of diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting. It's a research instrument. It operationally defines the criteria. So now you can define the population, these 3 symptoms. Now you can look at 12 associated clinical signs. You can look at this related to that. You can look at this related to that. You can look at all this sort of stuff because you now have a defined population based on the checklist for diagnostic, pathogenic parenting, the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting, will give you that defined population for research. You can't do that with parental alienation. There's no definition for it. You can't do research. You can't do treatment. You can't do nothing. It's awful. You get rid of it. No, they're not going to get rid of it. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up here, just kind of orienting as I come through. And next time, because what I did early on is meet up with Bill Burnett and started to share what the pathology is and how we need to move over, and then watched how they respond. Okay. And I have it all documented because I do not anticipate they're going to respond well. However, I have to act as if they are not pathological, act as if they were actually professional level, act as if they were actually motivated to solve the pathology. And that will allow them to expose then that no, they're not. They're not motivated to solve the pathology. They are part of the pathology, and they are motivated to be part of the pathology. And I will allow them to expose themselves, because I know for 50 years this is going to continue on, and you'll be able to look back at how a pathology created a group of people and created PAS. Okay, everybody, all the parents are thinking, oh, PAS is my, it's a description. No, it was created by the pathology. It's bait. Here, take the bait. You grab the bait, and then it takes you into the family courts and destroys your life. Here's the bait. Destroys your life and keeps you from getting a diagnosis of a shared delusional disorder and child psychological abuse. As long as you're using this parental alienation, you're not using the DSM and you're not solving it. They are part of the pathology, these hookah smoking caterpillars of your PAS experts. So just as I met Bill, I joined a parental alienation study group and was writing about what was going on. And when I published Foundations 2015, Bill Burnett offered an article or a response, a review to Parental Alienation Study Group, where he called it old wine and new skins, or new wine and old skins, or something like that. He got the metaphor wrong even. But that he said basically, Dr. Childress isn't saying anything new. It's just parental alienation using new words. I'm serious. It's just parental alienation using new words. He's unable to see anything that's not parental alienation syndrome. No, Bill, using new words means it has new meaning. New words like delusional thought disorder, new words like child psychological abuse. Those words have meaning, Bill. So it's not the same thing as parental alienation. Everything's not parental alienation or variants of it. And that's what they think. It's just like they only see parental alienation because that's the only thing they're experts in. If they say it's attachment pathology, they don't know attachment pathology. All of a sudden, they're not experts in that. If they say it's personality, they don't know that. If they say it's family systems, they don't know that. So factitious disorder. And so the only way they get to be experts, and they so much want to be experts, that's the narcissism in them. And the only way they can do that is if they make things up. So they cannot accept information. And that's, I call it the Escher paradox. The shared delusion cannot see itself. So you can't, like the two hands draw on each other, the shared delusion cannot see itself. And so it's a very interesting feature. And you'll see that with Bill Burnett and the Gardner PAS people. That parental alienation, they cannot see that that's actually part of the pathology. That's hiding. That's a euphemism to cover up what the pathology, and they won't see that. They can't. It's neurologically impossible. It just bounces off and falls on the floor. And so I've got that documented over all these years of blogs and meetings and stuff. I met with Bill once in Boston, I think, when we were same conference. And I said, Bill, you need to switch. Nope. And met with him in Venice with Dorsey and parent advocate. Bill, you need to let. Nope. It has to be parental alienation. So now he's on his course, and we'll get to where he's at. But meeting him back in 2012 and through 2015 sort of thing. Then, so I was reaching out to your supposed allies. Hopefully they would switch over and we could get a diagnosis. And my goal was to get into the journal, American Journal of Family Therapy, which they were on the editorial board for, and get some published articles, and get those published articles and then take back to the forensic psychologist. So it was going to be into the PIS people, get some published articles, and then focused on the changing the forensic custody evaluations. And I could use the support from this parental alienation PAS community to then get the changes that we need with the forensic psychologists. But they withheld their support, the PAS people. They would not publish in their journal. They would not accept any of my articles. They said, no, we're not going to publish anything from Dr. Childers, and we are not going to discuss Dr. Childers in any way. So that's very enlightening. And it's documented, because you can go back and look at all their articles and all their writing, even up to 2020 in Bill Burnett and Lorando's. You can look at all their writing. They never once cite to Dr. Childers or the DSM-5 or delusional thought disorders or child psychological abuse. It's all parental alienation syndrome, and and that was a conscious decision. I got word through the grapevine that they had a little meeting of PAS experts, and their decision was to absolutely flat out ignore Dr. Childers, give him no oxygen whatsoever. And they'll show me, that if you're not going to accept parental alienation in our group, then we're not going to accept you. That's such low-level psychology. Okay, they're not really psychologists, so it's low-level professional practice. It's not really professional. And to deny reality, to deny delusional thought, and to deny those diagnoses and prevent those diagnoses for parents and their children because of a turf war, because you want to be experts? No. And I'm going to have to kill PAS because it's creating fighting. It's part of the pathology. It's bait. No, we need to get rid of it. I don't want to get locked up into endless fighting about made-up pathology labels. Use a DSM. The moment we get rid of parental alienation, everything is solved because we apply the DSM-5. Okay. But they won't get rid of it. They won't get rid of it. So with that, I'm going to head off to the rest of my day. And so there's your hookah smoking caterpillars of the PAS people. I think we're next up. I think the next place to get into is the 2015, 2016 period. And so that's when I did my, where are they? Here it is, my books. Okay. 2015 and 2016. That's when I said, boom, I'm out and I'm ready to do these. These are tools. And I'm using them now. Okay, these two. And so we're 2024. I published these about 10 years ago. So I work ahead. And so I'm going to need these later. And so I produced them so that when I need them, I have them. So now I need them, I have them. And you could have used them earlier as parents, but you didn't, because you're locked up and being misled into parental alienation stuff. And the PAS people and forensic psychologists don't want to solve anything. So this is documented proof that nobody really wants to solve anything over here. And I've given you all the information. I gave it to you by YouTube's when I first started out. Nobody's using it. So I'll just keep going forward. But I'll talk about that 2015, 2016 period. And some other interesting aspects of this pathology. This is such an interesting pathology in the family courts, and it's hidden. And when you think about that, when you think about this pathology, it's the transgenerational transmission of sex abuse trauma. Okay, so what's it do? It hides. It isolates its victim, the sex abuse pathogen, and it gets allies. Keep it away. Keep it away. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. And so there's the attachment system. Okay, the child never rejects a parent. They never, even physically abusive parents, the child doesn't reject a physically abusive parent. It takes quite a bit, and even then, it's not really rejection. It's something else. It's hostility, aggression on things. But because it's a primary motivational system, the other direction is death. The only time an attachment system will switch over is when the parent is a predator. And so the parent's more of a danger to the child than the tiger is out there. And so that's when you get it. When does that happen? Sex abuse. Okay. With sex abuse, the parent becomes a predator. And so you'll see that switch in the child of a sex abuse parent. They don't want to bond to that parent. In fact, they want to get away from that parent. Okay. Now they don't do it flamboyantly or anything, but boy, that parent, that's a little symptom feature of sex abuse before it's reported. Is you get a special relationship between the kid and an adult, the kid and the parent, but the kid wants to get away, and you see these little signs that they're uncomfortable in that. That's you. Yeah, and so when I came over here, my very first case, and saw a kid wanting to flee a parent, I go, that's not possible. That's just not an attachment. No, that's just, unless it's sex abuse. But there's no sex abuse in the family. Oh, it's a transgenerational transmission of sex abuse. The sex abuse was to the parent or the grandparent, and it's coming through. Okay, so that's what we got as our core pathology here. It's a transgenerational transmission of trauma, which is why Gardner picked up on that sex abuse one, because it's a rippling sex abuse, and why everybody fights. Because is it authentic sex abuse, which is a lot of the allegations of the allied parent and the DV monkeys and stuff about this is authentic sex abuse, or is it a false allegation of sex abuse, a ripple second generation of sex abuse? Is it true sex abuse or false sex abuse? And it's hard to tell because it's the same thing. It's got a lot of the symptom features overlapping. The way you can tell, part of the way, is authentic child abuse is very constellated. You see the symptoms and they're all kind of grouped because it's active now. With the transgenerational, they float out. And so the symptom features are more distributed among several people, among this, a group. And so that's the rippling. And then every generation, it becomes a little bit more diffuse. So you can actually, on transgenerational trauma, you can tell when the trauma entered the family system by how diffuse that symptom set has become. With this stuff. So with that, off I go to the rest of my time, and we'll check in with you next week on another adventure